All right, folks, Dan Bidondi here, TruthRadioShow.com. It is now December 5th, Wednesday of 2018, early morning here and after midnight. And on top of me here is our guest, Hugh Frances Sqiure. And on the right of me is, we call him Leo the Masked Truther because he's got to keep his identity clear because he works in the film industry and everything. So he can't reveal who his identity and all that stuff. But we're going to call him Leo the Masked Truther. So, and the guy above me with the cowboy hat is Hugh Frances Sqiure. We've been trying to get him on for a very long time now. And Jim Stallings Jr., thanks for tuning in. Hey, Jim, the guy above me here, you got to have him on your show as well. And we're going to get you other shows too, Hugh. We're going to get you down to other shows. But this is something that's very serious going on. Hugh Frances Sqiure has lost 4 of his wives, 4 ex-wives, murdered by the federal agents. He's been a target. His lawyer's been killed. And but Hugh, please, by all means, take the reins here. Introduce yourself and just start from the beginning. And you got all night if you need to.
I'm Hugh Frances Sqiure, and I own Bottom Line trademark, and I've owned it since the 60s. And Dan, I want to thank you for everything you do to keep my guns here.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I need these to stay alive to tell America the truth.
Amen.
I've been targeted by the government all the way back in 1957 when Admiral Byrd was murdered. I was kidnapped. And then I escaped my kidnappers. My kidnappers were Osborne, Hall, Anderson, Long, Wallace, all these people who became governors and run the...
His audio just got cut.
Hey, your audio got cut. We can't hear you. That's amazing, isn't it? Like,
every time.
They cut your audio, brother.
I can see your video, but no audio.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, what we could do too, Dan, is have him hang up and call back, and hopefully that repairs it.
Yeah, if you could you hear me? Hugh? All right, disconnect and call right back in.
Yeah, call right back.
Yeah, disconnect and call back in. Yep.
Yeah, he just left.
That's amazing how they just cut his audio like that.
Yeah, man.
This poor guy, every time he comes on the air and all that, something's always going on. They got this guy on bead, that's for sure.
Yeah, Dan, listen, when he does call back, man, I'd like to kind of start him right from the beginning.
Yep.
And start asking him about his life when he was born. He had a twin.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, you sound good.
It's amazing.
Start all over?
Yeah, go ahead.
You want to start all over?
Yeah, go ahead. Just
the senators who eventually became.
Well, I want to thank Dan. I want to thank you for everything you do to keep my guns.
Oh, you're welcome, man.
Say something to me, Dan.
You're welcome, brother.
Okay.
We'll keep fighting for you, man.
We still got a connection.
We do.
I don't know what happened. Every time I go to do a video or an interview, I get cut.
Yep.
I have been targeted by the CIA, the FBI, and every president since Kennedy was murdered. And Kennedy was talking directly to me.
Wow.
And in his last speeches, he was sending me letters, handwritten letters I had from 3 Kennedys, that the Osborne, who runs the FBI sex crime division, to this day, that family stole those letters out of my home in Tennessee before they murdered my wife. I've had 4 wives murdered, 4 wives and dozens of kids murdered. And can you still hear my feed?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I own this trademark, Bottom Line, since the 60s. Kennedy's last speeches, he was saying, to you Tribune publishers. And I was on the front page of the Chicago Tribune, and I was Bottom Line Publishing, and I was an ASCAP BMI publisher. You had Stargate, the Goa'uld. Well, Morton Goa'uld signed my publisher's license in Foley Federal Court in New York. And the first person beheaded by the CIA in a studio, they told you Muslims beheaded Foley. That's a lie. Foley Federal Court gave me my license. They stole my license, Bottom Line, worldwide. $2 trillion they stole from me back in 1970.
Wow.
DuPont, Cummins. I had 28,000 worldwide entertainment contracts with people like Dolly Parton, Burt Reynolds, Kenny Rogers, Lionel Richie, anybody that mattered in entertainment worldwide. I owned the contract.
Wow.
You've talked to Sophia
That's
Stewart,
crazy.
John. I talked to John B. Wells on Coast to Coast. 5 minutes later, he was fired because Hubert Wells was SWAT team sitting next to me playing cards on 9 Mile in Warren, Michigan. And he was SWAT teamed in 1979, sitting with me. Me and him and his daughter were playing poker all night. SWAT teamed him, killed him. You got John B. Wells on Coast to Coast. Coast to Coast didn't even exist when I worked for the Bidondi brothers, almost like your names. They own Premier Networks. They were hit over the heads with hammers while I played drums and rock and roll as Bottom Line. This is my federal tax license. And it's Bottom Line New York. I own Bottom Line New York. Jesse Ventura wants the truth of Kennedy. He wants the truth of Hoffa, but he never interviews me, and I contact him daily. Alex Jones showed you a chalk drawing of the Twin Towers and a little girl crying. My 7-year-old daughter was kidnapped and raped off her school bus at the age of 7.
Wow.
By Cooper. By Cooper.
Mr. Sqiure, may I ask you a question? May I ask you a question?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Okay, so I want to know about young Huey Sqiure and just kind of how your life started out. I know that you said you had a twin brother, and I want to hear a little bit about that and things from a young.
He was murdered. He was murdered in Osborne's basement. He was beat to death by Marines, and his body was dumped in a Pennsylvania field. And there's no record of him being my twin, but I can tell you I was chained to a toilet. My family was writing the songs that Elvis sang in Vegas. Mitch Ryder was my brother-in-law. He was writing songs like Little Latin Loopy Loo, Good Golly Miss Molly, Devil with a Blue Dress On, and everything he wrote, Born Publishing handed it to Elvis to sing in his movies or in Vegas at the casinos. And it's no coincidence that Elvis Presley died on a Philly toilet, the same type of toilet I was kidnapped and chained to at the age of 4, on the day they murdered Admiral Byrd. Admiral Byrd is my relative. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And you do have some interesting relatives. You also state that you believe that you're related to the Queen. And talk.
I don't believe it. I know I am. Princess Diana. If I'm related to Admiral Byrd, I'm related to Princess Diana. Right. My mother had dinner with the Queen before she died. The Queen is my mother and her sister's cousins. Her mother was Mrs. Fuller, and Mrs. Fuller was Edgar Allan Poe's literary critic in London.
Right.
Prior to her death. The Howe family on Coast, you have Linda Mooten Howe, and she knows me. She married into the Howe family. The Howe family left a statue to the Fuller family on the East Coast where you're at, Dan, not far from you. You can Google and look for the statue to the Fuller family. That's my family. Fuller transmissions. There's a Fuller transmission in every semi on Earth. They made them in Battle Creek. That's my family. That's my grandmother's brother. You go through 5 gears, you pop the pin, you go through 5 more. That's the Fuller transmission. That's my family. My grandfather, Mr. Harris, you have in the Smithsonian, you have Harris steam thrashers in the Smithsonian. Next to those steam thrashers, Osborne, Wizard of Oz. Oswald, Wizard of Oz. Jack Ruby, Ruby Slippers. Next to the steam thrashers in the Smithsonian, you have Jack Ruby's shoes. You have the Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland shoes. And I knew the Garland family. I grew up with them. They owned the Travis restaurants. I have history in me like you can't imagine, and people think I'm crazy, and I'm not.
I don't think you're crazy.
No.
Well, they label me as crazy. Because they're hiding my truth and they don't want you to know who really killed the Kennedys. And I'm telling you right now, Oswald, Hall, and Anderson, and another man named Nick, I believe it was Nichols, but I can't be certain. It might have been Nicholson. I was 4 years old. I know his first name was Nick, and Nicholson kidnapped me again when the world got Jack Nicholson in all those crazy movies. One flew over the cuckoo's nest with the Indian bowl in the toilet.
Oh, yeah, I see that movie.
And I was married to an Apache Indian.
Oh.
Actually, yes, speaking of that.
Out of all 4 of my wives, this is real important, Dan.
Yeah.
2 of them were fiancés. One was Terry Heath. She was from California, and she created the Head Start program for Ronald Reagan back in the 60s. At the same time, I created Bottom Line. And here's Bottom Line. And this is real important. Okay, Terry Heath Olson called me because she was protecting little kids. In Wisconsin, she was running CPS. She ran into a porno ring. 2 policemen kidnapped her. 2 off-duty policemen kidnapped her, put her in a police car, and drove her across 3 state lines. And at that point, she called me and she says, Hugh, you're the only guy on earth I trust. Help me. So I looked around. Mr. Manning offered me a farm, a Civil War farm called the Battle of Blue Springs, at a price I could afford. I moved Terry from, they had driven her from Wisconsin to Iowa. She got a flight back to Wisconsin. I picked her up and moved her whole home in a semi back to the farm I bought from Mr. Manning. Now, Mr. Manning at that time, they were telling you about the gay man, Chelsea Manning. And the other thing that people don't relate is Manning's co-creator of the Congressional Archives on JFK's murder. So I'm on his ranch, Civil War Ranch, and the girl that asked me to pick her up and help her running CPS in Wisconsin after 2 policemen illegally kidnapped her, Mr. Manning, oh gosh.
No, it's overwhelming.
There's so much involved in this. That's a Congressional Archive. She asked me to pick her up. I pick her up, put her on this ranch, and 6 months later, she's dead, hanging in her dog's leash. And she had asked me, she said, Hugh, somebody's outside stalking me. Please take the dog out for a walk tonight. We had dinner, made love, and I forgot to take the dog for a walk. She took the dog for a walk, and 10 minutes later, I found her hanging in her dog's leash.
Wow.
Yeah. And they wrote that off as she committed suicide. And this girl was hiding she was hiding 2 kids that were being used in pedophilia. Same as I was kidnapped, chained to a toilet, and beat by Marines, and they raped me. They murdered my little kids around me, and then raped me. And I escaped out a window. And then when I escaped, they were frightened. This was Osborne.
So did they use you for like sexual ritual abuses too, like in satanic stuff?
Yes, Dan. They burned me. They beat me. They cut me. They cut my father's hand off.
Oh man.
Yeah, Dan. And none of this is in the papers. None of it.
Wow.
I find it amazing. Go ahead.
This happened in 1957, Dan. I'm a little 4-year-old kid. My family's writing the song Elvis Sings. When I became a publisher, I'm going to jump way forward, if I may. Here's 9/11. That's George Bush in a kindergarten class, and my girlfriend put him in there, Veronica Rapanti, at Community Services. He's in a kindergarten class, the same kind I was kidnapped out of by Osborne. That's Doug Mills, and Doug Mills is my uncle. That's my uncle's family, sitting next to Bush as the first plane hits the Twin Towers.
Wow.
Bush says, on 9/11, he says, Hugh's structures are collapsing. He meant to say huge. He said my name. He had a Freudian slip and said my name, and I got the video on my Facebook. Anybody can watch it. And he's talking to my family, Mr. Mills, and everybody, if you look back in history, Bourne published Elvis. Mills published people like the Pointer Sisters. The 2 biggest publishers on earth, and I'm the 3rd one, Bottom Line, and you grew up with Bottom Line events. And here's the entire state of Vegas at the same time telling me I can't use my own trademark or my own birth name. And this is from the state of Nevada. And when I moved here after my wife's murder, the CIA tried to set me up giving videos to patriots, people like yourself, and lure them into burns. If you remember Remember Alex Jones talking about that? And he said it was all
Yeah.
CIA. Well, he got his information from me. Same as Jerome Corsi does. Jerome Corsi has been my friend on Facebook for 10 years. And he searches out my stories and reads them, and that's where he got his QAnon. QAnon, I own Qbert. Qbert was a computer game, and my father-in-law was Joe Jacobs of IBM. His daughter was just murdered, and I divorced her in 72, I divorced Nancy Jacobs. She was my first wife. I had a daughter with her and a son, but the son isn't mine. The son is a homicide detective who was supposed to be watching me because somebody attempted to murder me. I come home one day, and the homicide detective's son was in bed with my new wife. And they had a baby together, and they named the baby with my name. It's not my son. It's that homicide detective that was supposed to be watching me. Okay, Mrs. Jacobs, Nancy Jacobs, her real name was Fredericks. You got Fredericks of Hollywood. It's not coincidence. Her father was really Mr. Fredericks. My last wife that was murdered was Victoria. You got Victoria's Secret. That's not coincidence. That's designed by design. 2,500 corporations in America stole my trademark. That's my federal tax license. It's federal tax license for Bottom Line. They don't arrest me, Dan. I go on CBS.com and I say, on CBS, CNN, MTV, I knew all these owners. I had contracts with Fox, and I have all these documents. I had contracts with Fox before Fox Cable existed in New York. I owned all the music contracts. Sophia Stewart, you got the Matrix and Terminator movies. One author that worked for me, I had 28,000 other authors. All of them were stolen, and I don't exist. They every day on the news, you can Google Bottom Line, and you'll come up with Bottom Line dresses, Bottom Line technology, Bottom Line this, Bottom Line that. It's my stolen trademark.
Speaking of bottom line, Dan and I are both huge wrestling fans.
Yeah, they all earned their money. They all earned their money at my stolen trademark because of DuPont and a man named Claire Cummins. When I was 4, Claire Cummins was Milky the Clown at Twin Pines Dairy. And he put the first missing kids on milk cartons. Elsie, Borden's milk. Elsie was my aunt. She was married to Cass, and you got Mama Cass on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the connections, go all the way back to the 50s. My Aunt Gardner, Ava Gardner, Aunt Gardner, she took me to the World's Fair and introduced me to the Premier of London.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you call him, the Premier? And Frank Olson, all the way back in the 50s. Her family created the very first TV series on earth, Make Room for Daddy. Make Room for Danny Thomas. And from Danny Thomas, you got Phil Donahue, married Marlo Thomas. In my town of Warren, Michigan, Marlinga, which isn't coincidence, he was the mayor in the 60s. I was living with Quinn the Eskimo, the Quinn family. I worked for Russ, running Acme Cleveland. When the Wall Russ, I put up the guidestones, and people think, you've been lied to. You've been lied to. You got so much misinformation. I work for JC Electric. I also work for Christensen, JC Christensen. The guidestones were put up because the chief of the Blackfoot, the largest Indian tribe on earth, was our friend. The guidestones are Indian, Mother Earth religion in 12 languages. We like the chief. That's all they are. It's not about culling and killing everyone.
Let me ask you a question about that. Is there a certain specific, because a lot of people talk about how they align with certain degrees, like 33 degrees and things like that.
I don't know all the things he did, but I'm a Mason at birth. Albert Pike, yeah. They murdered Albert Pike. He's my great-great-uncle.
The Star Trek.
Well, Christopher Pike.
Right, yep.
No, Albert Pike was head of the KKK and head of the Mason.
Right, I understand.
Well, so I was at birth, wasn't I? I'm ASCAP. Listen to this, and people don't know what's really going on. I showed you I'm ASCAP. I can't find it now.
So you're related to Albert Pike?
I'm the cap, and I'm the cornerstone. I'm the bottom line. I'm the cap. I went to school with Mueller. I went to school with the Koch brothers. I went to school with Al Capone's kids, his nieces and nephews. The FBI renamed them, gave them a different name, and hid them. And from Chicago, they moved them to Michigan. And I went to school with these people. Mueller, Jerome Corsi. Stone illegally cut the bone out of my foot while I was chained to Osborne's basement, to a toilet. I was chained to a toilet. Marines are raping me. And Stone illegally cut the bone out of my foot. And anybody can x-ray my foot and see the scar.
Yeah,
the bone's gone.
For our guests who were just
okay, so who's Mueller investigating? He's investigating Corsi, and Corsi gets all his info from me, has for the past 10 years. Stone just pled the fifth. Well,
and that's Robert Mueller, right? The FBI guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Because one of the listeners was asking about that.
I don't know if it was his daughter or his dad or his sister, but Barbara Mueller went to school with me.
Oh, okay.
Okay, with the Koch brothers. And Capitani. You want to talk about the capstone? I'm ASCAP. A-S. I'm Sqiure. A Sqiure Cap. I'm the capstone. I'm also the bottom line. I'm the cornerstone. And this is what they've stolen, and they've been lying to you. And I'm related to presidents. I'm related to Thomas Jefferson through the Portwood family in Pennsylvania. My mother's family was here in Pennsylvania in the 1600s. I'm Dutch. They told me, after they kidnapped me, they told me I was German all my life, and I'm not. I'm Dutch.
So, okay. Could I ask you something for the listeners? Because there's been a lot of, huge conspiracies and all that stuff about Georgia Guidestones. Do you want to clear that up? Is that a New World Order?
No.
Propaganda?
No. Every generation, you and I, Dan, are the New World Order. We, the people, are the government. And we all got to fight for freedom. Every generation, we got to fight because it's an ongoing fight. Right now, my bass player at Bottom Line was Tony de Blasi. Tony was a decorated veteran from Vietnam in the Army. He come back, decoration. He played bass for me, and he was born in Brooklyn, New York. He was my bass player in New York for 50 years at Bottom Line. He died of a heart attack. A Russian man took his name, de Blasi, and became mayor after Giuliani in New York. He's a Russian man. He's not even born in New York. He's Russian. Giuliani is the biggest liar on the face of this earth. Look at the things he posts, how ignorant that man is.
Yeah.
He's hiding the truth. He's hiding the truth of 9/11, and I'm the truth. After stealing my trademark, and they gave you Hulk Hogan and Jesse Ventura, Dwayne Johnson, Triple H. When Triple H started wrestling, I was on my third wife because they murdered the first two. So I'm going to be marrying Victoria's Secret. You got Triple H. Now I've had 4 wives murdered since you met me, Dan.
Yep.
That's what I started to say. Nancy Fredericks, Nancy Jacobs, Joe Jacobs' stepdaughter, they cut her leg off. Then they murdered her. They murdered her on the day they let the Bundys out of jail. And I'm the guy that Wesley King, the head of the Carpenters Union, came to and asked to spread the first videos of John Ritzheimer to get people like you, Dan, and people like this guy, the militia here to Burns, so they could put you all in jail. And I refused, because I knew the method of operation. They had done the same thing to Mr. Harris at Ruby Ridge. And Ruby Ridge was my girlfriend, and they cut a ridge up her backside that's that big for no reason. For no reason. I bought her a house, and her father is the guy that wrote a book, and the FBI says they found a spot of Jimmy Hoffa's blood in his house, Miller. So I bought his kid, Mary Miller, a house right in between the tech center and the tank arsenal. And I won't say the street. It's near Henry Street in Centerline, Michigan, at the tank arsenal. And the tank arsenal is that's my great-grandfather's homestead, the tank arsenal, Centerline and Warren. And he lost that for $75 during World War II because of the new taxes.
Wow.
Well, he also lost 4 sons in World War II, and he had 17 sons fighting in World War II, and they took his farm away and made the tank arsenal on it.
May I ask you another question, Mr. Sqiure?
Go right ahead.
Okay. So I wanted to get into the bottom line entertainment. You talk a lot about that. Can you say how that kind of influenced Stone Cold Steve Austin in the WWF? Because we were kind of talking a little bit.
Well, he used to come out drunk. Yeah, he would come back back when Tom Petty got his start. My new wife, Victoria, her ex-husband was Tom, who's now dead. His name was Tom Monjo, and he lived in Harrisville, and I'm the son of Harris. And Harris was Lincoln's guest at Ford Theater the moment the actor Booth shot him. And this is all related, and it's the same people that murdered Lincoln, murdered the Kennedys. Right. Same families. Civil War. Civil War's never been a declared peace.
You hung out at the Ford Theater as a kid, right?
No, my Uncle Tony ran Henry Ford's mansion. Right. Old man Henry Ford, not his kid.
Not the kid, right.
Yeah, my Uncle Tony Sqiure. He married Susan. And Kennedy told the Federal Reserve to get lost, and for a present, for a Christmas or a wedding present, he sent Tony Sqiure and his wife Susan his first minute, Susan B. Anthony. Sent it to him in a plastic box, and the very first one he minted. 2 weeks later, he was dead, talking to me. Kennedy was talking to his last speeches. He said, "To you Tribune publishers," I'm a publisher on the front page of the Tribune, Chicago Tribune. My band and I, we would hitchhike to Chicago and play in Great Lakes Naval Hospital for all the injured vets coming back from Japan. My cousin piloted the Real Enterprise. Claire Rose piloted the Real Enterprise in Vietnam during the war. It had Huey helicopters on it. I'm Huey. Mm-hmm. Admiral Byrd was my ancestor. They murdered him. They kidnapped me, and the government has hidden me right out in plain view, and nobody can wrap their head around it. And this goes deeper than anybody can imagine. I'm going to put up a video tomorrow after I cut it out and I'm going to put it up. I live right now with the woman that ran the money department at Caesars Tahoe. One of the acts at Caesars Tahoe was David Copperfield. David's my little brother. My secretary was Janet Barclay. His most famous act is the Barclay House. And he writes on his arm, TS, and then he shows up in Bermuda with the TS and a whole different group of people in Bermuda from Caesars Tahoe. And she is my wife, Victoria, Tom Petty, and I'm Sqiure, TS. Right from there, David's my little brother, and Janet Barclay was my secretary. As he did this act at Caesars Tahoe, and the woman that gave me a place to live after my wife was murdered, she ran Caesars Tahoe. And they attempted to murder her at the same time they attempted to murder me in New York. I have a scar this big on my head. You got MC Hammer. I got hit over the head with a hammer. Took me a year to recover when I was marrying my wife.
Hey, didn't you say they actually killed you and you flatlined? Is that...
Several times, Dan. Yeah. I've been poisoned with cyanide. The only family in America that makes cyanide, do you know who it is?
No.
It's George Bush. They make it in Florida. It's made out of apricot pits. I know who killed me. George Bush gave me cyanide and a cup of coffee. Then you got an airplane crash and 300 people died and one little girl was sitting on the side of the road. They said that was the only girl on the plane, and that's a lie. I had just left Denzel Washington's sister, who was another secretary of mine. She was at IBM with Joe Jacobs of IBM. I left her there at a meeting. I went to the airport in Detroit. They gave me cyanide and a cup of coffee in a restaurant at the airport, and I bet you the plane captain had the same cup of coffee I had. And that wasn't long after. Long after that, they blamed Saddam Hussein for cyanide weapons. And if Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction that were cyanide, the only place on earth he could have bought it from was from the Bush family.
And that's why the Bushes were hell-bent on going after him. Is that correct?
Say that again?
And that's why the Bushes were hell-bent on going to Iraq after 9/11. To use as a cattle.
Cyanide. If he had that, and they never found any there. But if he had it, it came from the Bush factory in Florida.
Well, it makes sense because the Bushes... What's the first thing the Bushes did after 9/11? They went right to, nothing to do with Afghanistan at first. They went to Iraq.
After that.
Yep.
That's 9/11 as the first plane hit. My friends, I grew up at Selfridge Air National Guard. They murdered, when they kidnapped my daughter, and Jones gave you the chalk drawing, Dan. The chalk drawing came from Cook, and Cook is my music teacher.
Hold on a second.
It came from Gardner.
Hold on.
There's
I just want to answer somebody on Facebook here. It's Ray Srumered. I thought apricot pits cured cancer. Well, they do. It's just large doses of concentrated cyanide. That's what kills. And I think it's mixed with biotin to become actually hazardous.
They use cyanide for pills.
Yep.
They use strychnine.
Oh, no, yeah, she was like asking about the apricot seeds. But yeah, apricot seeds do cure cancer. But it's, they take the concentrated cyanide out and mix it with biotin, I believe. And that's when it becomes potent and deadly. But yes, go on. I was just answering a question on Facebook.
Supposedly why they use Bush makes cyanide is in the mints. Like when Kennedy sent my Uncle Tony the first minute Susan B. Anthony coin when he married Susan. Okay? And that was a week before he was murdered. The mint uses cyanide to clean the metal before they coat it. They electroplate it.
Yeah.
You know how a nickel comes? I used to work at a mint, Dan, and we use cyanide at that mint. That's why I know about cyanide, and it comes from the Bush family. So if Saddam Hussein had any cyanide at all, he got it from the Bush family.
Well, it makes total sense. I mean, that's why he went after...
Here's what scares me now. This George Bush Jr., he bought all the fresh water up all over the globe. His last week as president, he sent his daughter down to South America and bought up all the fresh water.
Okay, I got a question for you, too, by a listener. Jim Stones, he asked if you know anything about the eugenics operation. You know the trucks that go around this neighborhood spraying the glyphosate, you know, the chemicals to... so-called for bugs and all that, but it actually attacks our immune system and everything else. He wants to know if you know anything about that and that eugenics process of basically poisoning the population.
They're handling all of us, Dan.
Yeah.
The families that kidnapped me and murdered Kennedy, they run the CIA and the FBI. Trump has a handler. And if Trump has a handler, so do you, so do you, so do I. The entire country is being handled. Let me go into this. Let me take this into a whole other there's no telling what they're going to do.
Hold on a second. No, the question was like basically is the Bushes behind them using these chemicals all over the country to, they say it's for bug sprays and everything else, but it's actually causing...
They will do whatever they need to do to hide me. They've been hiding me for 65 years, Dan. And they murder people all over the country. They murder people to hide my truth. You just had the car fire. In the car fire, you had Smith, who is my uncle, and you had Bledsoe, and Lawson, and Waldo. They all died in the car fire. And they didn't tell you all those people testified at Kennedy's Warren Commission report. They were dead before the fire was set. And you got all this disinformation about it's lasers and no, it's not. It's murder, and they're covering up the murders. Now, Paradise is just below me. I've been sitting here. I make my own oxygen because it's so smoky here. I've been surrounded by fires for 5 years. They're trying to burn me out, but they don't know where I live. and I'm mobile. Okay? Here's a guy that kidnapped me. And he didn't kidnap me, but see, he's a priest. In the background, this is my Aunt Dorothy, this is her husband Butch, and this is Father O'Donnell. He was my first confession. I escaped Osborne and Hall and Anderson, and I made my first confession at 6 to Father O'Donnell, Catholic Church. He never called the police, never made out a report. He made me do 15 rosaries. I was the bad guy. I had to get down on my knees and do penitence. I was bad because they beat me, tortured me, killed kids, and made me suck on their penises. Okay, grown men.
Which is where Huber Vacuum comes from?
But here, he testified, O'Donnell, and you can go to the JFK site, he testified at the Warren Commission, helped frame Osborne. So that means he helped murder Kennedy.
Well,
yeah, Catholic Church helped murder Kennedy. There he is. That's a real picture. It says 1957 on top if you can read it.
Yep.
And I have the real pictures. I keep everything in a safe. Nobody will interview me. Now I'm going to go to, this is how old I was when I was kidnapped.
Oh, man.
And they chained me to a toilet and they beat me until I would suck on their penises. Grown Marines.
Wow.
And this Catholic priest knew it. And this is my uncle. He owned Hughes Street. I'm Hugh. It was right behind my house and right behind the house where they kidnapped me. And they built Baker College on Hughes Street, a property I own. Baker College. You got Tammy Faye Baker, Jim Baker, 7-Eleven, or what is it, 700 Club,
Yep.
The Baptist. All right, they all knew I was kidnapped. They built their college right on my street. And then on the day they murdered Kennedy, John Fitzgerald High School was shut down, and Hazel Park High School opened up on Hughes Street next to Baker College on the very day. And that's why I know I'm the truth of Kennedy, and for many other reasons. 11 Baker adult family members. Judith Laurie Baker was Oswald's girlfriend. 11 Baker family members lived on my farm 6 months before my wife was murdered, Victoria, and that's the third wife they murdered. You got this, Dan?
Yep.
And not only that, Roseanne Barr and Dr. O'Brien, Kathy O'Brien, they were in Hollywood to hide me. Stuart Swerdlow, I'm the bottom line. A Russian man says he's my cousin. He's related to the king. I'm related to all the kings of Europe via Admiral Byrd. And you can Google this. You can go to any library and look at his heritage. Princess Diana is my cousin. My little sister looks just like her. And you can go to any college and see that lineage. I'm related to every king of Europe. So what that means is that Thomas Jefferson and Washington and Benjamin Franklin in 1776, we threw our own cousins off the Delaware Bridge. And the Indian chief, the Georgia Guidestones I was telling you about, he protected me. He put me on an Indian reservation. His daughter, her name is Della, and she's still on my Facebook friends list, Della. She's the chief's daughter. The chief's dead now. The chief made a headdress for 30 presidents. Every president, he would hand him his headdress because he was the chief of the largest Indian tribe on earth. And he hid me on an Iroquois reservation. You got, as Stone cut the bone out of my foot, you got Gordon Lightfoot off an Iroquois reservation. The Belle Huey was an Iroquois. It became the Belle Huey after I escaped. After I had divorced my Apache wife when I was 24, it became the Apache. And that's not coincidence. In my life, that's reality. They murdered Scalia. Where'd they murder him? In Houston, Texas. That's not coincidence.
That's the judge.
My Apache wife, her father's brother was a Supreme Court justice, Mr. Westhouse, and my uncle, Mr. Fuller, was a Supreme Court justice. Instead of solving my wife's murder, somebody in the government murdered Scalia, thinking that would appease me, and it doesn't. You can't appease me with the murders of dozens of kids, the murders of 1 million people in the Middle East over lies, and the murders of my wife. My wife's ear was cut off. Somebody paid the doctor a lot of money to put on her death certificate, natural causes. I still don't have her ears to bury with her. And nobody helps me, Dan. You're the first person to actually ask me about these things.
Yeah.
Her ears. I don't have my wife's ears. I had to bury her without them.
And how the hell is it natural causes when her ears were cut off? I mean, that should indicate murder right there.
There was nothing wrong. There was never anything wrong with her ears.
Yeah.
I took her in because she choked on a drop of water. Then they sodomized her.
Oh, man.
Cut her ears off, and they slit her throat on Halloween Day and left her to bleed out and die.
Wow. And they say that's natural cause?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And they got away with it. And it wasn't one person that did this. It was over 9 people. And they did it right in a public hospital. And I had police reports in 2 cities, and the police put fake names on the police reports. And then the other city, where my wife's murder started, the entire police shift went to jail for dealing drugs.
Whoa.
And they lost all my records before they did. I still have my copies. But when they murdered my wife, they also murdered my attorney. Now get this. I told you earlier about Copperfield and Barclay, and Janet Barclay of Barclay Bank was my secretary at Shelby Service Center in Detroit. Way back in the 70s, okay, when Hoffa first disappeared. And Tony Tocco and Miller worked for me. And they weren't anywhere around when Hoffa disappeared. And I know exactly where Jimmy Hoffa's buried, but the police won't take reports, and they won't take reports because a state policeman buried him on my property. Got this picture?
Yep.
And they are murdering my wife in all the news. This is... Can you read that?
The bottom line, yep.
Yeah, and underneath it, can you see the red line?
Yep.
That's Obama's red line in the sand. With Gould, Martin Gould was his name, the Gould. Back when the Stargate was on the radio, and the blonde-haired guy with the glasses, the Gould were their enemies. Well, Martin Gould made me a publisher after Fletcher Neville. Let's read his name, Fletcher Neville. That was Kennedy's press secretary in the White House. That's my stolen trademark, and that's Obama's red line in the sand. I was creating a new type of music called Sand L Sand music. It was like you got rap, you had rock and roll. I was making an entirely new genre of music, and I had the songs written. I was publishing them. And they murdered me. They murdered my wife. They murdered my fiance, so it wouldn't happen. And Fletcher Neville, and the guy that made the cover on the book, Al Nagy, was my next door neighbor. That's Lee Iacocca's son-in-law at Chrysler. Lived right next door to me in Michigan. I used to kick them out of my house for drugging women and stealing their purses. They were running a gun and drug trade on my property. Well, I was gone for 6 months. I hired Blanchard and Bobby Brooks, and Bob Hope took Bobby Brooks to Vietnam to entertain the troops. Well, Bobby Brooks and Blanchard, and Brooks is my cousin, and that's a whole other story. That goes into NASA and the astronauts on the moon. My Uncle Flayton, his family, General Flayton, put the astronauts on the moon. Sqiure put the rovers on Mars. I'm Sqiure. Oh. Elton John, I'm the L on the line. Elton John from England. Oh, Princess Diana is my cousin. Oh, the Beatles, I'm a drummer. The Beatles, the Go-Go's, we got the beat. These people marked me and nobody on earth knows it because they stole my trademark. They stole my business, $2 trillion. When they stole my trademark and gave it to people like Ventura and Hulk Hogan and Johnson, who tell you they want the truth of Kennedy, but they don't. That's a lie. If they wanted the truth of Kennedy, they would have interviewed me 50 years ago. I own the land on either side of Jesse Ventura in Baja. where his home is, I own the property, Dan, on either side of him. And I have the deeds to the property.
I got a couple of questions from the listeners.
Fletcher Neville was President Kennedy's press secretary. There's my stolen name. He wrote 7 Days in May, 15 books, and then the very last book he wrote was my stolen trademark with the red line underneath. And then here, this is Thomas Garrett from CBS, premeditating with Manning my wife's murder. And they murdered my lawyer too. And I post this right on CBS, and they ignore me. They never take me to court. They don't sue me for slander, because if this stuff ends up in a courtroom, all hell's going to break loose.
Dan,
this is real.
Dan, I know a big part of our show is getting our guests involved. Can we take some questions from our guests?
Yeah. Go.
The one guy named Justin Almeida, he wants to know, ask Hugh if he believes that we own our own names.
No, we don't own anything. If they do this, they've murdered 4 of my wives. On the day they murdered Kennedy, they murdered my friends, the Duncan kids, 5 of them. My brother Michael had a Congressional Medal of Honor. They murdered 5 Duncan kids, and then they gave you the show, There Can Be Only One, Duncan McLeod. This is not coincidence in my life. And they do this. Thousands of movies. Grimm, watch Grimm. Grimm Fairy Tales, the Grimm Detective series out of Hollywood. Yep. They mark me like there's no tomorrow.
And they also want to know about what's the whole tie-in with the chemtrails. What's all that got to do? Is that involved with what you're talking about too?
I'm not too worried about that type of stuff. I do know, I taught electronics. Okay, now I taught electronics to people in Abrams tank plant when I was 14 years old. That's how intelligent I am. I was a teacher in Warren Consolidated at 14. Warren High, you got the Warren report. Okay, when they do the chemtrails, I do see HARP. And I'm not real concerned about HARP, because HARP is weapons to protect our country from Russia and from China, because they're using them. I have to use them too. I have to have the same, and there's weapons that go far beyond that now, Dan. They do have lasers, like you got that hand laser that'll cut through steel.
Yep.
They have those mounted in helicopters, and they've had them mounted in helicopters for 20 years.
I have another question too, Mr. Sqiure. So the other question that I have too is, have you heard of the term disinformation agent, and have you had them in your life, and have you been...
have I heard what?
Have you ever heard of the term disinformation agent, and have you been around these people that are working in the public eye?
Yeah, they do. I have 4 CIA agents right now who have done that.
Okay.
And they're doing it to me, actively doing it to me right now. Okay. They're on my Facebook, and they go behind my back, and they discredit everything I say. Like, they'll discredit everything I'm saying here, and you see the documents. This is really Tom Garrett destroying my business as they murder. You can see his name. Can you read it?
Yep, Thomas Garrett, 598. Yeah.
He from his White House press secretary office under Obama, they premeditated the murder of Victoria Milan. Her name was Mellon Banks. I drove crane for Chase. Morgan was my girlfriend. Chase Morgan gives everybody in the country food stamps. They were my friends. Mellon Banks. I'm Harris Banks. I'm not a lie. I'm poor because they stole my trademark all the way back when I wasn't even 18 yet. I was a multi-millionaire at 15. A multi-millionaire at 15. When they stole this trademark in 70, it was worth $2 trillion. And that's what they had to hide in the Twin Towers. And the Twin Towers didn't even exist then. When they stole my trademark, the Twin Towers did not exist. And where was Kennedy speaking at? The trademark in Texas. Same thing.
What can you tell us about the Jim Morrison murder in France?
About what?
About the Jim Morrison murder in France.
He was murdered. I worked for Morrison. Morrison is John Wayne, Maurice Morrison. I worked for Morrison out of Chicago. Our competition was Skinner, and if you look at Morrison, Morrison died in France, and then Skinner died in a plane crash, the whole band. Leonard was my competition when I worked for Morrison. Morrison was people like the Fontana brothers, Tony Tocco, Cobby. Cobby owned all the garbage trucks. I knew all these people. Rexall drugstores. Shapiro was my friend. Sonny Elliott on the weather was my friend. Bill Bonds at Channel 7. My license hung in Channel 7 News. I had all my FCC licenses to run my own TV station at 15. I had gone to the federal building in Detroit, taken all my FCC tests. I could take your transmitter there, Dan, at your TV station, build it, align it, put my license up, and you could operate it. And I did that at Channel 7 with Bill Bonds and Sonny Elliott. I used to deliver to Sonny Elliott and Bill Bonds. I used to deliver to Tiger Stadium. And Thionetta Washington was my girlfriend. Her two brothers were linebackers on the Chicago Cubs. Denzel Washington. Denzel tried to protect me back when Obama was in office. He went on, if you can find it on YouTube, and he said the trouble with America is everybody's too busy and too greedy trying to be first, and they don't listen to the guy that has the truth, and he was talking right about me. I had the truth, and nobody listens to me.
I've seen that.
Look at how long it's taken you to understand what I've been saying.
Yeah.
We've known each other for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
And you kept sending, you sent Wagner to me. Remember Wagner, the guy? He's never going to interview me. I worked for Wagner, Jeep Wagner. Willie Nelson, Jeep Wagner, same people. Well, Willie Nelson's guitar player, Cook, and Cook is the chalk drawing. Cook and I owned a ministry together, and Cook stole all my earnings, so I couldn't hire another attorney. The people that killed, I know exactly who killed my wife. Cook, Garrett, Manning, the doctor that signed a death certificate, my wife's nurse, the security guard from North Carolina, and that's Graham. And Graham told me that Oklahoma bombing was going to happen 2 months before it did. And that's in my Senate letters. Remember all these Senate letters?
Yep.
These are the real things. Some of them are handwritten. These are senators. Every senator in the country knows me. I live with Miss Ryan, who's Speaker of the House. Ryan. Her sister is Miss Simpson. What cartoon was Trump on? The Simpsons. Oh, Disney wrote music for me. I'm Baby Huey. I'm in cartoons too. Now you got the real picture, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no Disney wrote songs for me, and you can go on YouTube, put in Hugh Sqiure, Disney, and there's a song up there, Jesus My Friend. Miss Disney wrote it. I published it. I sang it with James Taylor in Tennessee when my wife was still alive. I ran the Methodist Church music for 7 years, and this is not coincidence. George Bush goes to the same church. And I'm telling the world truth, and I'm not crazy. And here's my murdered wife at the Twin Towers. Look at this picture, Dan. Can you read the building in the back?
Home design.
By who?
Michigan?
No.
I can't read the rest of it.
Michael Graves.
Michael Graves.
Oh, yeah, Michael Graves. See it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, my brother had a Congressional Medal of Honor. That's right at 9/11 at the Twin Towers. That's my murdered fiance who created the Head Start program, and that's Dana. That's Dana at Fox, her daughter. But I don't exist. And CBS, right out of the White House. After they murdered my wife, now he runs a show at CBS called The Takeout. The Takeout, after they murdered my wife on the Manning Civil War Ranch. And there's more in that than I can even. Here's 9/11. That's the picture of Terry at Bottom Line, my business in New York, the day before 9/11, at Michael Graves.
Whoa.
The other question I have too.
Here's the guy that raped me.
Here's
Anderson. Here's the Matrix Smith. Smith is my uncle. Smith and Wesson, that's my uncle. from Pennsylvania, for real. They just found in Hazel Park, where I was kidnapped, they found my Uncle Smith's leg in a murdered 12-year-old black girl's coffin, buried there for 40 years. 40 years from now, what year was that, 1970? Oh, the year they stole my trademark. My Uncle Smith from Smith & Wesson, his leg is in a murdered black girl's coffin, buried underground. They found it accidentally in Hazel Park, Michigan, last month. It's in the news. Look at the Detroit News, Smith, leg found in black girl's coffin. It's in the news in Detroit.
Unbelievable.
Here's Mr. Anderson. There's Mr. Anderson. Can you see it?
Look up more.
Mr. Sqiure, obviously your name itself.
That's Mr. Anderson, and it's signed on the back. 1958, right. Kidnapped and raped me and tortured me.
Hold it up a little more. There you go.
I took this to L. Brooks Patterson, and Patterson...
Hold it a little closer. Hold it closer.
Patterson, he's dead now. I made sure this guy's dead. And I didn't kill him. I just checked it out. But I went to L. Brooks Patterson, and Brooks is my aunt. Patterson, L. Brooks Patterson, Oakland County child killers, there's one of them. They wouldn't take a report from me. They threw me out of their office, were real mean to me, women. And then they gave you this lie of Dr. Nasser looking at little girls' private parts. A doctor, isn't that what he's supposed to do? But they won't tell you about the kids they murdered in the same town. And they won't take reports from me, the kid who was kidnapped. And they were using us for gay porno movies. Got that picture?
Wow.
And who was Jack Ruby? Who shot Oswald after they framed him? Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby, he ran all the stripper clubs. Oh, what do they do there? Pornography. You got the real picture now. And nobody can deny my truth. It's in everything, and their own stories will give my truth away.
Yeah.
I was in the book building with Vargas. Vargas painted Marilyn Monroe and every centerfold till he died. Vargas, he was an artist. I delivered, working for Morrison, I delivered to Vargas CO2. Oh, they want to tax CO2. CO2 tanks to Vargas so he could airbrush Marilyn Monroe. And Hugh Hefner's Playboy. I'm Hugh, and it was in the book building. You got real truth now.
Wow.
Well, they don't. That's why I can put. I put this right on CBS.com. Put it on CNN, and you don't know who kidnapped me. Anderson. Who kidnapped my daughter at 7 and raped her? Cooper. You got Anderson Cooper 360. Who kidnapped me? Whose basement was I held in? Osborne. Oh, I've had to listen to Ozzy Osbourne all my life.
Well, isn't Anderson Cooper CIA?
What's that?
Anderson Cooper, he's CIA, right?
They're the people that murdered me.
Yeah, CIA, right? Anderson Cooper?
Well, the CIA runs all the media, and I don't even know if it's the CIA. I honestly believe it's the Queen of London. I believe that all our media answers to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve is the Rothschild, and I'm a Rothschild. I'm a Rothschild, Dan. The Bauer family is where the Rothschild comes from.
Yeah.
My family is the Bauer family. I'm a Rothschild. And Jim Mars went around telling everybody that there are no Rothschilds in America. And he didn't know it. And I corrected him. Jim Mars was writing my book, and he was murdered as I went into a hospital. And that's no lie in that.
Have you met any of the other Rothschilds or any of the Roths?
There's one other Rothschild. There's a Rothschild living in Florida. If she's still alive, she won't touch water.
Did you meet her?
Yeah, I talked to her.
Oh, okay.
All right. She's been in a wheelchair all her life, and there's no reason. She's too lazy to walk, and I'm telling you the truth. She's too lazy to walk. So she's had people taking care of her, sitting in a wheelchair, and she won't even wash her hands. Terrified of touching water.
And why do you think that is?
Huh?
Why is she afraid to touch water?
Because she knows the chemicals they put in it.
Okay.
That'll answer some of your blows of fate questions. I ran Vista Wall. Vista Wall is an aluminum company. Harris, my family, owns it. CEO is Harris at Vista Wall in Tennessee. I ran the extrusion department and rebuilt Iraq. After they bombed it and carpet bombed it, I rebuilt it at Vista Wall. They became very rich rebuilding it. A byproduct of aluminum, and aluminum is plastic. People think aluminum is metal, and it's not. You extrude aluminum, same as you extrude plastic. Same principle, it's just a higher temperature.
Yep.
Aluminum is one atom away from being oleomargarine. And there's a reason. It's because they can retool the aluminum factory and just make butter and sell it to you. Everything is done scientifically. And I'm not saying oleo is bad for you. If I want aluminum to be strong and I want to build the Twin Towers out of aluminum, I inject radiation into it as it is extruded. And I learned how to do all this at colleges. And I was taught so I could run Vista Wall. And the radiation crystallizes the atomic structure, and the more crystallized it is, it can go on the space shuttle, and it can be heat resistant. It can be the windshield on the space shuttle. Glass is aluminum.
Do you have any knowledge of us as a country or other countries around the world spraying aluminum in the air that will later be radiated?
Yeah, that's been being done. And I said this on Coast to Coast, and George Norrie cut me off. If I go on Coast to Coast, I can't say my name.
Yeah.
I can't say my business is Bottom Line, but they use it every day. Now, every day, CBS, NBC, Fox, Warner Brothers, everybody on earth that matters will tell you in the news, and the bottom line is. And they're doing that because I was the bottom line in Montreal, Chicago, 242 countries before they stole my trademark. And millions of people knew me. I played every day of my life in front of 5,000, 6,000 people every night, 7 days a week for 38 years.
Whoa.
So they say what I am after stealing my tax licenses, after stealing my trademark. And they've been doing this. How old are you, Dan?
44.
They've been doing it since before you were born.
Wow.
What can you tell us about?
You don't know I exist. So that answers that guy's question. Your name don't matter because I'm Hugh Sqiure, related to 30 presidents and to Princess Diana, and they stole my name worldwide, and nobody even knows it except me.
What can you tell us about Lyndon Brennan Johnson, LBJ, and his true identity and what role he played in the Kennedy assassination?
The only thing I know about LBJ is my secretary was Janet Barclay. I was raped by Marines, and then L gave me a blowjob. And I hope you put that on your radio show.
Well,
that's fine.
And the other thing I know is he called my family's farm after being sworn in as president. That following week, Kennedy was still being buried. He called and gave his condolences about the 5 dead Duncan kids, and they gave the world this lie of they all ate arsenic. Now, Dan, how many brothers and sisters do you have, Dan?
2 that one
Okay.
and one that I know of.
Imagine you have 5 brothers, and all of you ranging in age from 2 to 11 or 12, sat around and dined on a rat trap. Do you think that would be possible growing up?
No.
Well, that's what the LBJ, that's what they told the world when they murdered the 5 kids next door to me and murdered Kennedy. At the very time they murdered Kennedy, they murdered the kids, and I knew Mr. Duncan, and that's the Duncan yo-yo.
Yep.
And then I lived with Mr. Frisbee.
Can you talk a little bit? Can you talk a little bit about the Hoover vacuums and what that role has to play?
I lived on Hoover Street. My address.
Yep.
23148 Hoover, the day I was born. 23148 Hoover. No, that's a mistake. The day I was born at 8 Mile and Outer Drive, Holy Cross Hospital. Bob Barker delivered me. You know Bob Barker of The Price is Right.
Yep, Mr. Spader.
Oh, well, I knew him personally. And Mr. Barker, Dr. Barker, delivered me. And they fudged I was born at 12 noon, July 4th, 1953. At the age of 4, Mrs. Long, Huey P. Long, and Mrs. Wallace, Governor Wallace, handed me over to Osborne, the governor of Michigan. They chained me to a post in their basement and tortured me. And this is the kind of history of my life, Dan. Marlo Thomas, Phil Donahue. When I escaped, my best friend was Don Dool. Hang down your head, Tom. Dooley, hang down your head. That's not coincidence in my life.
How did your father know the Kennedys, Mr. Sqiure?
Navy. My father had Purple Hearts from the Navy. He was a cook and a machinist and a gunner's mate in the Navy with Kennedy. So was my murdered wife. All 4 of them.
Yep.
So, could you get into, do you know specific...
The girl I lived with that ran Caesar's Tahoe, her father was a cook, machinist in the Navy. They're all SEALs.
And one hot topic I'm sure people want to know about, do you know any more specific details about the Kennedy assassination?
Specific?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I made out a list for you, Dan. Here, I want to show you this. This is my uncle, General Flayton, Marine General Flayton. And he was a good man. He never hurt me. He put the astronauts on the moon. That's him right here.
Go up a little more. There you go.
He's got his back to the camera.
Oh, yeah.
And that's his wife, Doris Brooks. And Brooks she didn't raise her own daughter, and that's Bobby Brooks, Roberta Brooks. And they were running a CIA gun and drug trade on my ranch. I stopped it. I stopped Robert Tosh Plumley's gun and drug trade, and it was an illegal gun and drug trade on my ranch as he put the astronauts on the moon after Kennedy was murdered. And I'm a little boy sitting in a crib down here, and this was in June 1957. It was 2 or 3 months before I was kidnapped by this guy. And then I have pictures of the people that cut my father's hands off, and they were, get this, Dan, Cameron. Swerdlow tells you Al Balick was Mr. Cameron. Well, Mr. Cameron lived next door to me, Al Balick, in this Philadelphia experiment. In the boats, my birth date is on the registry numbers of the boats they say were the Philadelphia experiment. Swerdlow is hiding me, and he wasn't alive until 20 years later. Roseanne Barr and Kathy O'Brien. Dr. O'Brien was my real-life friend, Kathy's father. And they tell you that they hid them in Hollywood and used them and handled them. I'm the guy that Roseanne and Kathy O'Brien have been handling. You got this picture?
Yep.
They've been lying, and she finally lost her job. I've said this in other videos, and she lost her job because somebody knows I'm saying truth.
When you say they were responsible for putting the man on the moon, have you heard of Stanley Kubrick? I'm sure you have. And what do you have to say about his...
Which Cooper?
Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, Kubrick. I knew him. 2001, you got the talking computer from my family. Mm-hmm. My grandmother was Ma Bell Fuller. Ma Bell made Hal the talking computer, and Joe Jacobs was my father-in-law. The people that set my wife up initially, I wrote it for you, was the Wright family in New York. And the Wright family in Binghamton, New York, worked with Joe Jacobs of IBM at IBM. You know the Wright brothers in history. Well, Debbie Wright and Bill Wright said they were going to help me with my wife. And what they did is Debbie come out to my house, and Bill handed me a credit card so I could buy her some food after Garrett destroyed my business. And they live in Bedford, New York, next door to Timothy Leary. Do you know who Timothy Leary is?
No.
He's the father of LSD. Okay, LSD, the hallucinogenic.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, I'm aware of it.
He created it. Timothy Leary lives next door to the Wright family in Bedford, New York. And Debbie Wright, little Debbie's got a treat for you. She comes out and hands me $3,000. My wife was in a wheelchair with muscular dystrophy all her life. So get this, Dan. They cut the ears off and sodomized and slit the throat of a girl in a wheelchair who couldn't talk.
Wow.
That was my wife. I took care of her for 30 years. And they did this to a little girl. She was 4'11", in a wheelchair, who could never walk. You got this picture? Mm-hmm. And her husband before me was Tom Manjo, and they murdered him when you got Tom Petty and the Traveling Wilburys. And remember I told you the beat L's, I'm a drummer? They marked me because Elton John, I lived next door to John Nichols all my life. His son Benny and the Jets. And they murdered his granddaughter. Nobody knows this. John Nichols' granddaughter was murdered in my backyard. She was three months old. 3 months old. The girl across the street, you know, before it's news, you know Jerome Corsi, you know Duff. You don't know Heather Duff because they murdered her at the same time. She was 7 across the street from me. And that's as the FBI arrested me for Jimmy Hoffa's murder. They didn't arrest me. They detained me. I don't think the FBI can arrest you. I think they can only detain you.
You were working for a semi-tractor-trailer company driving at that time?
Morrison, John Wayne in Wayne County.
Yeah.
I worked for Morrison out of Chicago. That's John Wayne.
Morrison Carbonic, right?
And I stopped, get this.
Yep.
My Aunt Fuller, get this. My Aunt Fuller was Edgar Allan Poe's literary critic in London, and I already said that at the beginning of the movie.
That's fine.
I stopped Bucky's drug trade and Blanchard's drug trade, and Blanchard was governor of Michigan, and Brooks. They had a gun and drug trade with the CIA going on the back of my ranch. Edgar Allan Poe wrote Murders in the Rue Morgue. I'm working for John Wayne, the cowboy. I'm his little buckaroo. And you see, that's what it's like to be handled by the CIA.
A big question I think I have for you coming up with a lot of your testimony here is, because you were claiming earlier at the beginning of this broadcast that everybody is being handled. How often, and does everybody's name and profile also
Even
have
Trump is handled. Trump doesn't know what I'm telling you right now.
No, I understand that. Let me finish my question, if I may, please. So, if you have this profile...
He knows parts of it, but he won't act on it.
So, the question is, does everybody have a similarity in nature? So, if I were to take my real name, or Dan were to take his real name, would he find other people that have similar things, other companies? Like, how far does this thing go? Like, what
it goes back, most of this, the only thing I can answer for is in my lifetime. I can trace my history back to 2000 BC. Mm-hmm. Okay? And it's online. If you just put my name in, Hugh Sqiure, and Google it, you'll get a guy in France, that's Thomas Jefferson, named Hugh Sqiure. And then if you go far enough, you get the Matteo Ioneo family over in Rome, and their name was on the Roman coins handed to Judas when he turned Jesus into the Roman coins. In Warren, Michigan, I own BB Street. I'm Huey. I played with Jim Gold in the gallery for fun. And a band, they wrote the song, I don't know much about history, I don't know much about geography, but one thing I do know is I Love You. It was a famous pop song back in the 60s when I was a kid.
This has been happening
Jim Gold,
Earth. This has been happening to you.
Well, let me finish it.
I apologize.
I own BB Street. I'm Huey. I was raised to be a priest. A priest is a fisher of men. I own BB Street. BB, Net, and Huey. Premier of Israel. Got this? And he's the only one over there. He's an Arab, and all the other rabbis are from Turkey. Israel is a big con. And Dan, I know you believe in God, and so do I. I believe in a creator. My family wrote the Bibles. And knowing my family, I don't believe them. Schofield is my family. He writes the Living Bible. In Vietnam, and I was with Schofield during Vietnam, he would go into a village, he'd cut 100 heads off of women, kids, and the men in the village they took, put them on posts and take Polaroid pictures of it, and brag about how many gooks he murdered as he cut their heads off. He writes the Schofield Living Bible.
Yeah, I personally don't.
My family,
Yeah, me either.
and Admiral Byrd makes me a relation of every king in Europe. King James Bible, that's my great ancestor. Okay? It's 1776. King George was my ancestor. We kicked him out of the country. And we did the same thing with Hitler. Hitler's also one of my cousins. Merkel, Hitler's cousin. We kicked our own cousins out of one of my fathers. His father was from Berlin. He was a Jew from Berlin. I'm a Berlin Jew. And my name in that family is Schwartz. And you got Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that's not coincidence. It's not coincidence. I was born in Detroit. It's all black people. I was the only white person in the city working for Morrison because the riots were going on and they wouldn't let nobody in the city. I had the Jackson family is my family. Michael Jackson is my great-grandfather's slave family. They still love me. Got this picture?
Yep.
So I could walk into Detroit and live in Detroit while the riots were going on, and they protected me. Biggest black people in Detroit would surround me and protect me all day, every day. Ike Turner was he would change the tires. Tina Turner's husband. Ike Turner changed the tires on my semis while I lived with the Jackson family. And the Jackson family gave me a home in the Virgin Islands. And you don't know me. And I was his publisher, and you don't know me.
So was Michael Jackson murdered?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All the stars, when they make it to... I'll tell you, Hop was buried under G&G. And you got Lady Gaga, and Lady Gaga comes from the same people that tried to frame me after they murdered my wife. Madonna, who I knew as a little girl, tried to frame me for my wife's murder, and she was part of the people that premeditated it.
Oh.
And I got all the documents. I got phone calls from Dolly Parton's cousins who were my caretaker. The Tweed family was married to Gene Simmons. Remember? Shania Tweed was Gene Simmons' wife, and they're divorced now. And the Tweed family is Dolly Parton's cousins. Tweed family were caretakers on the Manning Ranch where my wife was murdered, and they know my wife was murdered because their mother was murdered. And my Uncle Smith, Don Smith in Michigan, well, Don Smith at my farm, another Smith, his mother was murdered by these same people too. And they don't do nothing because they don't think they can do nothing. They say, well, that's just how it is. The government's corrupt. The chief of police, where my wife was murdered, looked at me and he says, I wish I could help you, but the federal government, just because they're corrupt, it isn't my problem. That's what the chief of police told me. Wow. So nobody's helped me. I still don't have my wife's ears. And then they murdered Nancy LaVoy. Nancy LaVoy, they cut her leg off first. The one before her, they put a ridge at Ruby Ridge up her back, that thick. Instead of sewing it back the way it should be, the surgeon sewed her back. And this was a beautiful woman. She could have been a Playboy centerfold. They cut her back and put a ridge in her backside that big. Wow. From her ass up to her neck.
Who is LaVoy again? Can you remind us who LaVoy was?
LaVoy?
Yes.
My wife was Mrs. LaVoy.
No, but which wife? What number?
They murdered on TV after my wife was murdered. Wesley King, a CIA agent who runs the Carpenters Union, and now you got the entire town. They got to rebuild 20,000 homes. Who's profiting? The Carpenters Union. It isn't Do Weapons, and if it is, the Carpenters Union boss is behind it.
Right.
And I know this firsthand because he gave me the first John Ritzheimer videos 2 months before anybody knew about Burns, Oregon, Malheur. And that's a couple blocks away from where I'm staying now. And I've been here since my wife was murdered in 2011. The Ryan family gave me a place to live. And gee, see this? It's a piano. This is a piano. It's a Kurzweil, 88 keyboard piano. I played piano all my life. I grew up on a piano.
The Kurzweil is an awesome model. I love their piano.
I love it. And
Kurzweil is great.
This is the original synthesizer, and it's real. I can sit here and be every instrument in an orchestra.
Kurzweil music is the best plugins.
Every movie sound, I could sit here and make a movie soundtrack anytime I want, and I have done that.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how Bill Gates may have gotten his software for his idea?
He got it from IBM, from Joe Jacobs, my father-in-law. I and Joe used to play golf together when I was 16 years old, and his daughter was 21, and she had actually raped me in the back seat of a car. Not pregnant. Yeah, I was 16, she was 21. That's rape in Michigan.
Yeah.
My father told me to file rape, and she wanted to get an abortion. And she came to me and she says, "Give me money to get an abortion." And I was studying to be a Catholic priest when she raped me, going to Catholic school. I believed in God, believed in Jesus, and I bought the whole 9 yards. All right. And Dan, King James wrote the Bible, and if the monks didn't write what he wanted, he murdered them. And that's my family, and I know this firsthand. It's passed down orally, generation to generation. I don't believe murderers are the word of God. And I'm just telling you, I know you believe in a creator, and so do I. But don't believe everything in that Bible.
Well, there's Bibles predating King James.
The Living Bible is worse.
No, I mean like the
Schofield, my cousin's writing that, and he cuts their heads off.
I don't read the Schofield, but there's Bibles that predate the King James.
Yeah. Well, I'm a publisher, Dan. I could publish any Bible on earth and change it any way I want. So
yeah.
you find the Creator inside of you. And if I didn't believe in God, I wouldn't be here. And God, if I didn't carry this, I wouldn't be here.
Do you believe so? In your beliefs, and I don't want to intrude too much to you, but in your beliefs, you said you find the God inside of you. Are you? There's a lot of people out there that believe that they have God inside of them. They themselves can be a God.
Some of us are born knowing God, and I'm one of those people. And when I've been dead 3 times, I know my God. I know Him personally. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying I can talk to Him, because nobody on this earth can talk to God. God turned His back and left. He hasn't returned. He's supposed to one day, according to that Bible they hand us. And I don't even know if that's true, Dan. But I do know that murderers, rapists, and killers, premeditated killers, are not the Word of God. They're using that to control us. I do know there is a God, because this world, everything in it, and even NASA proves that God exists, because everything has a design to it. And Earth is one of the few planets that has life on it. So I believe somebody created us. I believe that. For a lot of good reasons. And I was born knowing God, and I don't know why. I just was. When I was kidnapped at 4, how many 4-year-olds know God? I knew God. That's the only thing that kept me alive. And it also gave me an avenue of escape. And then I grew up on an Iroquois reservation. And here I missed this. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to get your question again. But this is real important.
No, yeah,
Cameron lived next door to me. And so did Pratt. And you got The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Remember the song?
Yep.
Edmund is one of the janitors at a Catholic church that used to rape me at 4. Ed. Fitzgerald, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Hughes Street, the high school, Hoover High School, or Hazel Park High School replaced John Fitzgerald High School in Allen Park, in Hazel Park. At the Hazel Park racetrack, you got George Thorogood. The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Who wrote that?
I'm not sure.
I'm not either. But who died? He lists who died. People that died, Cameron and Pratt, my next door neighbors, they were merchant Marines.
Oh, all right.
Marines framed Oswald. And all this fits in the game.
We got about 5 minutes left here, and we're going to bring you back on to continue. So if you want to come back on the show again to continue where you left off. But in this last 5 minutes, you want to explain basically what you're doing to stay alive and if you know anything that the government's staging to do next, any false flags or, you know, any writings on the wall that you know of that's going to come to pop.
Well, if I leave here and go shopping, men around me from World War II, they look right at me and they tell me they're going to kill you. I don't know why I'm alive. Here's what I'll tell you. Is God, my creator, the creator I was born knowing, he has a purpose for me. And I'm fulfilling that purpose talking to you. Amen. Nobody will interview me. And
well, I definitely want to get you back on probably tomorrow night, maybe. We'll continue with a second
White House press secretary stole my life, stole $2 trillion from me. This is journalists at CBS, Fox, CNN, Anderson Cooper. Anderson raped me, Cooper raped my daughter. Alex Jones got all his information from William Cooper the day they kidnapped my daughter, and I rescued her out of an excavation company. They were going to bury her, just like they buried Jimmy Hoffa. She was locked inside a caterpillar. I rescued her.
Oh, before you go to, do you got specific details about Bill Cooper, how he was murdered?
The day I bought because that family raped my daughter. The day I bought her a divorce.
Oh, okay.
The day I bought her a divorce, 2 policemen shot him in his driveway. They also murdered Judge Hunter Sqiure at Selfridge Air National Guard. And this is pre-9/11.
Oh.
Judge Sqiure was my daughter's case.
All right, what we're going to do is, if you can remember, like, where you left off.
Dana Fox, but I don't exist.
Mrs. Sqiure. Mrs. Sqiire.
Simmons was my caretaker, but I don't exist.
Yeah,
hold on a second, Mr. Sqiure. What we're gonna do is we're gonna continue tomorrow night if you're available for a second part, you can finish this.
I'm here as long as it takes. And I want to tell you, I need a criminal attorney, a damn good one who can travel to Tennessee. And these people that murdered my wife, they got away with it, and there was at least 9 of them.
Wow.
And they're still free to kill.
Well, thank you for joining. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll continue tomorrow night with the second part. And anything you want to, Leo, you want to throw in that before we get going?
No, I mean, it's a great testimony. I just appreciate him being on the show.
Yeah, same here.
Again. And,
I don't lie. I don't lie, and I can. How much time you got?
About less than a minute, but I mean, like.
Kat, are you there, Kat? Come here, fast. Watch this. You still there?
Yep.
Can you see Kat? Kat.
Hey, Kat.
This is Kat Ryan.
Hi, Kat.
Come on closer.
You ran the money department at Caesars Tahoe.
Yeah.
And they tried to kill her as you were supposed to meet the owner and the IRS, correct?
Oh, could you move her more toward you?
Come closer, please.
I can't. That's as best as I can do. But this is Kat Ryan, and she's Chippewa Indian. Her family owns Mount Rushmore, and I'm related to 3 of the presidents of the 4 on it. She's Lakota Indian. She don't lie. If I call the FBI about dead kids carried across state lines, what do?
Hang up on him.
Could you hear that?
Yep. Repeat that louder, I'm sorry.
Loud.
Hang up on him.
If I call the police about dead kids, what do?
Hang up on him.
You got that?
Yep.
She's not lying. She's a witness, and this is why they kill my wives.
Wow. Well,
this is why they kill, and I'm not married to her. I'll never marry again, Dan.
Yeah.
She rents a room from me.
Well, either way, protect her. Keep her protected.
She carries too.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on camera, miss.
Yeah, thank you, miss.
Shit.
All right, what we're going to do is, Hugh, thank you so much. We're going to continue.
Fighting for this. They brainwash the kids. They think they don't need them, and you need them more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how important the Second Amendment is, to protect everybody. But, Hugh, we'll see you tomorrow night. If you want to hang on there, I'm going to finish this video. So just hang on 1 second. All right, folks, this is Dan Bidondi for TruthRadioShow.com. We're going to continue tomorrow night with the second part. Again, on my right is Leo. He's using disguise name and disguise, as you can see, to protect his identity. He works in the Hollywood industry, and we call him the Masked Truther. And this is Hugh Frances Sqiure above me here with a great testimony, and we're going to have mine for a second part, hopefully tomorrow night. And again, Dan Bidondi Show on TruthRadioShow.com. Hit me up at Twitter at Dan Bidondi. And anybody out there that knows a good lawyer, wants to do pro bono or whatever, or just a good lawyer in general, please contact one of us. And his information will be here on Facebook too, Hugh Frances Sqiure. But we'll see you tomorrow night. Dan Bidondi, TruthRadioShow.com. God bless.
Take care.
Declaring war on the New World Order, TruthRadioShow.com.